So do you have any other questions for us?
Yes, I would like to file a complaint against Section 30 of the Disability and Discriminations Act against the person who was trespassing me, because the purpose of their trespass is come into effect as a result of my not wearing a mask and refusal to provide them with written documentation despite the fact that I've complied with all other legal obligations.
Alright, so you being trespassed is just because they don't want you in there, it's not based on anything else?
Just when I thought we had finished up with all the garbage arguments about masks and mandates and jabs and all the hoo-ha now that the election's been and done, I walk into Service SA to do a licence renewal, and I'm confronted by the lady, Melissa. She wasn't rude to me or anything, but she obviously had a policy that was set down by her superiors that she was told to follow. And when she asked to see my mask exemption, I gave her evidence verbally about my exemption status, but that wasn't sufficient for her supervisor, so her supervisor came down to talk to me, demanded to see a written notice. Obviously I refused to comply with that because that right is protected under the Disability and Discrimination Act. She went and got her supervisor again, who then decided that she wanted to enforce this, and then when I refused to provide written information to that effect, she evicted me from the premise. So what ended up eventuating is I left the premise, and I actually called Sapol to file a complaint against the manager of the premise, who was committing a crime, which was a crime against the Disability and Discrimination Act, specifically Section 30. I was requesting to gain entry into the building so I could perform the services that I needed to perform. Now, one of those services was to have your photo taken, and to have your photo taken, you had to remove a mask anyway. So the entire thing was ridiculous, and there was no common sense being applied here. Now, the police, while they approached combative from the outset, because obviously they're sick of all this mask business to begin with, but one of the officers actually approached by calling me a peanut. So he's opening with insults when I was the one that called them for assistance, which is not a pleasant way to begin. But eventually it got to the point where they determined that clearly I could not be fined for not wearing a mask because I was under no legal obligation to provide written documentation of an exemption. It was communicated that, first of all, they tried to decline the fact that verbal evidence is also evidence, and they tried to tell me that in court verbal evidence is never accepted because it always has to be documented in writing, which is completely untrue. So the police officers are just spinning stories as they go because they weren't really comfortable in the position that they were in. But eventually got to the point where we determined that, okay, we're not going to be issuing any fines for mask breaches because no fines can be issued. Instead, what they decided to do is to trespass me. Now, they trespassed me, claiming that I was a physical threat to the people in the building, which is completely ridiculous. I made no violent threats. I made no threats of any description. All I asked was for my rights to be upheld, which was to gain access to the premise. I expressed to the police that this was unfair, and I expressed to them that clearly the trespass was being committed as a result of my refusal to wear the mask, which in itself is a breach of Section 30 of the Disability and Discrimination Act. And it is my belief that by upholding that trespass and enforcing that trespass, police now are also guilty of the breach of that same act. So here's a video of the police, and you can tell me what you think. Now, for purposes of this video, I have provided evidence that I am exempt from wearing a mask. I gave that evidence verbally, that I haven't read it. I have told you that I have a relevant medical condition, which is all I'm obligated to do.
From now, that's not relevant.
I know that's not relevant. So what I'm saying is, I've provided that information to her.
Oh, that's not relevant.
I know you're saying that's not relevant anymore, but for the purpose of the video, so we can get context, I provided that information to this lady.
Okay.
And as a result of that, she asked me to leave the building because I didn't want to furnish a written document to that effect.
All right.
At which point I left the building calmly, and I phoned you guys looking for assistance because that was a breach of Section 30 of the Disability and Discriminations Act.
Sure.
And now, as a result of my calling you in order to express my lawful right as a person with a medical disability to enter a public place without a mask, I'm now being trespassed.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with everything you've just said.
I know you're saying it's nothing to do with that, so what is it to do with?
Their safety.
Their safety, and what safety threat do I pose?
I don't have to detail that to you. I do have to detail to you, though, that the person in charge of this building and this area is saying they don't want you inside.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that, but...
So, instead of talking, how about you listen?
I'll listen.
What was your full details of this?
No fixed address.
And what's your mobile number? 04
That's right. And it was Sandra that gave that request for me to be trespassed. Is that correct?
I don't
know.
I just talk to whoever's in charge of the building.
Okay. Yeah.
If any of them are feeling unsafe because of your behaviour, you've been up in their faces filming them and all.
Oh no, I haven't filmed at all. I pulled my phone out. I said I was intended to film, and she told me it was illegal to film.
I think you're probably just taking up more time than is needed, and you're just being a bit difficult, and they probably just don't want you in there, so they can continue doing their job.
I understand that.
I think you're probably impeding them trying to fulfil their tasks for the day.
If I was
so at this time, so
well, obviously. If I was allowed to go do my business uninterrupted, there would be no impedance to anybody's day, including your own.
All right, so at 2:29 hours today, so you know what the date is today?
I do, yeah.
28th of March 2022. You're being trespassed for 24 hours.
Yep.
You are not to return to this building.
Yep, that is fine.
Be arrested. Do you understand that?
And now can I please grab your name, just so, because I'm not a complaint against you, it's a complaint against them, but just...
Absolutely, so Constable Davey, 77343, that's me.
Yep, and your name?
Constable McDonald, PD 10133.
Yep, no problem.
So it's just there if you forget it or anything.
Yep, all good.
On his shoulder. So do you have any other questions for us?
Yes, I would like to file a complaint against Section 30 of the Disability and Discriminations Act against the person who was trespassing me, because the purpose of their trespass is come into effect as a result of my not wearing a mask and refusal to provide them with written documentation despite the fact that I've complied with all other legal obligations.
All right, so you being trespassed is just because they don't want you in there. It's not based on anything else.
But it is. I mean, obviously it is.
Let's not keep going around in circles. If you want to make a complaint against section whatever act you're listing.
I do, and you should be aware of it if you're going to issue trespasses against me once, when I'm the one that called you.
I'm aware of the trespass legislation. I'm not aware of whatever legislation you're
I can show it to you. Would you like to see it?
No, I don't want to see it. You have to contact a lawyer and go...
Well, I don't need a lawyer. I'll file it directly.
File it through who?
Through the courts and the Human Rights Commission.
All right. Well, you go do that. Courts are that way. Magistrate Court of Port Adelaide is just over there. And the police station's next door if you want to complain about us.
Yep. Oh, no, I didn't want to complain about you. I wanted to complain about them. But, I mean, if you're unwilling to take my complaint seriously, which it seems that you're doing, because this is a crime.
No, it's not a crime that we deal with. We deal with criminal matters.
No, that is an actual criminal matter, and it's specified in Section 42 that it's a criminal offence.
Well, you can try
federal legislation. We don't work under federal legislation.
Yeah, you can
we have no authority under federal legislation.
You can contact FedPol if you want to talk to them about
all right, I will do that.
I wish you all the best with that. I hope that maybe they'll listen. I don't know. All right, so I'll get you to head off for us.
Okay, well, I wish I could say thank you, but unfortunately, I called you guys for assistance, and you haven't been very assistive.
We've been assistive to the victims in the matter, which is them.
No, that's not true. I'm the victim in the matter because I'm aggrieved, because I have a lawful right to enter a public building in order to carry out lawful activities. And what is happening right now is a violation of my human rights, which are protected under federal law.
All right.
And that's the same law that you guys have to operate within.
Is your vehicle here, or are you walking?
No, I'm walking.
All right, which way are you walking?
Well, does it matter? I mean, I'm not on the property anymore. Now, in addition to breaching Section 30 of the Disability and Discrimination Act by trespassing me when I have a lawful right to enter that building without a mask as a person with an exempt status on masks, I am now being denied my lawful right as a result of trying to exercise that lawful right, which becomes now an act of victimisation. Now, victimisation is covered under Section 42 of the same Disabilities and Discrimination Act, and actually carries with that penalty of 6 months potential imprisonment. Now, it is my belief that not only all three of the people that tried to decline me from performing my tasks that I had set out for the day lawfully, that the person who asked to have me trespassed and the police officers who enabled that are guilty of this offence. Now, it's actually the police officer that suggested to them that I be trespassed instead as a way of dealing with it. The officer that you see I was speaking to is the one that made this suggestion. So they didn't come up with it on their own. The officer suggested this. So clearly the officer is very much pro-masks, pro-mandates, pro-whatever. And this is the outcome that we get when we get police banning officers from attending work who don't particularly agree with some of the rules that are being set out. Instead, we get officers that are sympathetic to these causes, even though they're not specifically legal and they have no legal right to stand on. And we have officers that now that utilise other pieces of law and legislation to bypass the actual law that should be being upheld by them. Now, they're claiming they have no grounds to enforce any acts that are federal
or to press charges against anyone or to take any action against a person who's committing a law if it's a federal law, which is untrue. I've been picked up police before for traffic offences which are written into federal law, not just state law. So, I mean, I know this to be materially false information, but this is just police making things up as they go because they have an opinion and they're pushing that opinion down upon me, even though it is not a lawful duty of theirs to evict me from this premise for that purpose. And not only is it not lawful, it's illegal. But hey, that's the world we live in. So I'm going to be sending this off to the Human Rights Commission and off to SACAT as well. I'll send it off to OPR. I mean, I know nothing happens with OPR. I've had issues where I've lodged far more serious issues to OPR before and nothing happens. I just send it back to the officers to investigate themselves. But maybe I'll send it off to my local member as well, and my local member can determine whether or not police are doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. Now, this is a fairly minor case. It was uneventful, but people who have disabilities should not have to put up with undignified treatment for anything, including COVID-related and mask-related incidents. So, hey, this is the world we live in. I don't like it.